That would be depressing.
Yeah, I know.
Check it out.
Maybe that's why they
She's
didn't.
dying.
I don't know.
She's passed out
On the PC, she's.
This is what I do, Snow White.
So is this everybody then?
No, I think there's just one more.
Do we steal the
That's
table that we
it?
need?
Okay, let me know when we're ready.
I will.
Did anyone here win the trivia contest yesterday?
We tried.
I won a prize.
Did
I
you?
was very excited, yes.
You won?
I did. I answered the question about how many sisters Ariel has.
What is the question?
6. She has 6. Don't ask me their names.
Okay. He named most of them, yeah. His aerobics instructor.
Now, do you remember the names of the sisters?
You cheated on that part.
I have 5 sisters myself, and my mother, when the movie came out, said, that was based on your sister. I said, Mom, it wasn't based on my sister.
You should have told her yes and made her happy.
Yes.
I should have. If I had any sense, I would have. Like, and your dad, he has gray hair. Okay, no, I remember the singers. Quada, Rista, Tina, Andrea, and then there's the ones. Adela, Alana, and Eric. Yes.
Good job.
Yeah. And Sebastian's original name was Clarence. In our earliest treatments, he used to be called Clarence, and he wasn't Jamaican. And then Howard Ashman had the idea to make him Jamaican. I guess we should be waiting for people.
Okay, so I think this is it. So we have 20 minutes, and I'll let you guys know when we're getting close to that time mark. So hopefully you can all get your questions addressed. And for that, I leave you with Ron and John.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you guys started the movie, did you really think it was going to be as big of a hit as it is now? Because anybody in this room can tell you, we grew up to Little Mermaid.
Well, some of us raised our children.
It's okay, I'm sorry.
I would say no, we didn't. I mean, we felt it had potential to be a really good film, I think, from fairly early on. And we were intimidated because it was the first fairy tale. I mean, we were of a generation that kind of, I guess, we're both about the same age, we're the baby boom generation.
We both saw
started-
Sleeping Beauty in the theater in '59. I was born in '50. We both were in '53, and so we were 6-year-olds when we saw Sleeping Beauty. And that was the last
We
fairy tale before this.
aspired to work at Disney and had been there for quite a while, but Mermaid felt like it was kind of special because it was the first film that was a fairy tale, and so it harkened back to like Snow White and Cinderella. So we felt a certain amount of pressure with that, but no, we didn't.
Well,
we didn't foresee.
When we're working on it, the public doesn't see it very much, not even our own families for the most part. And so it wasn't until we started to have public previews and we saw the reaction, we got some sense of that. And in fact, then just as the movie was about to be released, I think somehow Spielberg, I don't know if you had seen it, but Peter Schneider, who was an executive at the time, we were in his room for something else, he said, Steven Spielberg says it's going to make $100 million. And so we were like, really? Spielberg thinks it's going to make $100 million? And so we were getting, there was excitement building, but as you're doing, we were the audience for the movie, really. You're just trying to make a movie that you think that we would like to see, and you hope somebody else will like to see it too. So we didn't really anticipate
And I know
its success.
it seems like it takes, from the outside, if you spend 4 years to make a movie, that seems like an eternity. And it is to a certain degree, but a lot of that is pre-production. When you really get into making the movie, it's a fairly intense period, and the last year of Mermaid, because the release date is set. I mean, you know you're coming out that November, and the toys are being made, and you're behind schedule. And almost every film, to some degree or other, I think is behind schedule at some point or other. But there was a lot of pressure that there was almost like, are we going to be able to get the film done in time? And it's almost that's so consuming, just trying to get the film done in time, that you're so preoccupied that you forget about anything else besides getting the film done. So it's kind of, whoa, it's not only did we get it done, but people really like it.
The other thing where I really felt like I realized that we had made an impact that might last, the following October, after the movie had come out, knock on the door, you open, trick or treat, and there's a little girl dressed as Ariel. And I'm like, we made it into the popular culture, we crossed over. This is not even one of my own children, this is a stranger.
Well, the other thing along those lines, I remember going back, I'm from Sioux City, Iowa originally, and John's from Chicago, so we're both from the Midwest, but I went back home over the holidays that year, and we had relatives, and they were like, you gotta see this, you gotta see this, and they bring in their kids, and the kids are singing the songs, and they know all the words to the songs. And it was like, well, that's kind of interesting. I don't remember anything quite like that before, so that made it seem like the film had some impact.
But in a way, it was good that we didn't worry about, I mean, we worried about, like you said, the precedent of, you're trying to make a movie that'll stand up just being compared to Cinderella and Snow White and that sort of thing. But we were naive in that sense, in that we just were trying to make a good movie. And so we didn't have that kind of pressure because we didn't really know if it would, no animated film at that point had made over a certain amount of money. There was a question, could it or not?
I mean, the truth is, I mean, I think Disney was generally really happy with the movie, and Jeffrey Katzenberg was happy with the movie, but about 6 months before the movie came out, I think the sense was they thought that it would do okay, but it would be limited because it would be kind of perceived more as a girls' movie, and that was sort of limited its box office.
Yeah, I was in a meeting with Jeffrey Katzenberg where he was talking to Michael Eisner about the movie, and then we talked to him about it, and he said, we don't expect it to do as well as Oliver and Company because, it's a girls' movie, and girls' movies don't do it. We're like, it's a girls' movie? And we didn't even realize while we were working on it that, I'm a guy, I like this movie. So we were glad that he was wrong.
What they didn't foresee, though, was that it would have a fair amount of adult appeal along with kids' appeal and even be a date movie. I think that took everybody by surprise, that it sort of broke through, and which is always, for us, we never, I mean, of course, we're Disney fans, and if you know the history of Disney and even Walt Disney, when we were making films like Snow White and Pinocchio and Fantasia and Bambi, they weren't really regarded as kids' films. They were family films, certainly, but there was always a lot of emphasis on making films that adults could enjoy just as much as their kids, and a lot of emphasis on quality that if you were just sort of making a kids' film, you wouldn't do. So I think we never thought of Disney animated films as films for kids, but there was a somewhat, with the audience, I think, there had been a stigma that had built up over years that to really kind of see the films as just kids' films. So it was really, we were really happy that it broke through and became more of a family film, and even a film that people saw, like I say, a date film that young people saw without their parents. That was kind of a first for an animated film.
I had read some story notes from Walt Disney on Bambi. Bambi was released in 1942, and they had an in-house screening of Bambi before it was done. And some of the note cards that Walt got back, one of them said, well, I think the kids will like it. And he was like, what are they talking about? Is that some kind of crack? What is that? The kids will like it. Because he really didn't think he was making films that were just for kids. And that was the approach when we made this film. We didn't think, oh, this is a kids movie. We thought it was an all-ages movie. And that's the approach we took in making it.
And what do your kids think about the movie?
They really like it. I mean, I've got 3 kids. I've got twins who are twin boys. We're 27 now. I've got a daughter, like I say, who's 24, who grew up with the movie, and they were excited by the movie. Although it's like it's what Dad's job is. He goes to work and he does the thing. So it wasn't. I think it was nice when they go to Disneyland and then we get in free and stuff like that. But
I have a son who's a teenager at the time who hated musicals, and I think still does kind of hate musicals. But he liked the film. Like he liked the film. But yeah, I felt at the time there was something about the generation of people who were teenagers in the '80s, the MTV generation, really sort of had a thing about musicals that it was tough to sort of embrace. And we didn't have that. I mean, we were fans of musicals kind of growing up, and I think it's really sort of fun to tell a story with music and with song, that it adds a dimension to that. So, and Little Mermaid actually kind of brought musicals back a little bit at a time when musicals were kind of out of favor in Hollywood, I think, and actually I think made younger kids now more fans of musicals again and stuff now with like High School Musical and stuff like that. I think there is a connection somewhat to Mermaid and Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and the other musicals of that period that sort of brought that back.
well, some of these ladies are young enough; they kind of fit in some of that period as kids.
Yeah, that's the odd thing now too is that now people
who saw the movie as kids have kids.
Yeah,
That's the
kids
thing for
take
this
their
was. I
kids.
assume that might apply to some of the people here. That,
that's
you
always
can
been
share
kind
the
of
movie.
part of the Disney thing that makes it kind of be a legacy.
Generational,
The generational thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
up wanting to work on Disney films? Is that what you said earlier? And how did you do that?
Yeah, and I think John is similar. I was really, I drew a lot as a kid. I was a big animation fan. I was a big Disney fan. And when I was 9 years old, I saw Pinocchio, and something about, I don't know if I was just the right age or whatever it was, but I just came out of the theater feeling that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be involved in animation in some way. Didn't really know that much about it, so I went to the library to try to find out everything I could about how animated films were made and how it was done. There wasn't a lot at that time.
Now there are a number of books, but at the time there was one book, The Art of Animation,
Yeah.
by Bob Thomas, who, it was written almost, he took a book that had been worked on for years and adapted it partly as a promotional vehicle for Sleeping Beauty when it came out. So the book came out like in 1960 or something. We both found it in the library, in our respective libraries.
Check it out over and over again.
And explained how animation was done a little bit. And so I grew up, yeah, same deal, thinking I might want to be an animator. Then I kind of lost interest as I got older a little bit, and I segued more into comic books. I wanted to work for like Marvel Comics or be an editorial cartoonist on a newspaper. I did editorial cartoons, and then I came back around to animation in college.
We made little Super 8 films, little animated films with a Super 8 camera.
I went to Cal Arts. I had gone to Northwestern back in Chicago. I have an English degree, and then I was an editorial cartoonist. But then I got more interested. Chuck Jones, the famous Warner Brothers director, did the Roadrunner movies, and I came to Northwestern and talked about animation. Kind of rekindled my interest in animation, and then I heard about this. I sent Disney a portfolio actually here because they were looking for young artists. I got rejected by them. It was a killer because I had they asked for animal drawings, and I had no animals within sight because I come from a very allergenic family that no animals were ever near us. So I went to the zoo in Chicago. It was wintertime. It was freezing. I was freezing drawing the animals. So I wound up going to the Natural History Museum in Chicago, and I drew from the dioramas there. And when I sent Disney my portfolio of drawings, then they rejected my portfolio, and they said my drawings of the animals were too stiff. And I was like, they are stuffed. I drew them exactly like this. But anyway, they said, maybe you want to send your same portfolio to Cal Arts, which was just California Institute of the Arts. It's up in Valencia, not about 40 minutes north of here. And they were just starting a character animation program with Disney veterans teaching it. So I sent my same portfolio to them, and I got accepted there, and I studied for 2 years there, and I was in the same class there as John Lasser. John Lasser and I and Brad Bird were all kind of in the same class. And so I learned a lot about animation in the 2 years I was there, and then I've been here since then. I started the week that Star Wars came out. It was the week I started Disney.
I actually started a couple of years before John, but the truth is that for years and years, Disney films were done by a lot of the same people, a lot of the same artists who had worked on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, worked on films like The Aristocats and Robin Hoods that came out in the 70s. But it was actually before that actually the last film that Walt was involved with was The Jungle Book, and he died during the making of The Jungle Book. And the studio actually at that time wasn't sure if they were going to keep animation going or not after Walt died, because a lot of the artists were in their 60s, like they were approaching retirement, and it was a question of whether they might just kind of let animation kind of go away. But Jungle Book turned out to be a huge hit. It was like one of the biggest Disney movies in years. So because of the success of The Jungle Book, they decided, well, maybe we should keep animation going. And then they started actually recruiting and looking and trying to bring young people in to kind of learn. Because if they didn't, there really wouldn't be a way of doing that kind of animation. So when I came in, it was when after they had started this talent development program at the studio, and you applied, and I got into their talent development program, and then you got to work with the veteran animators, and they kind of mentored you. And
the guys who had done Snow White and Pinocchio were our teachers. They called them the 9 Old Men, but they were a group of veteran animators, and we learned right from them. Where literally you do animation, they put it on their drawing board and put a sheet of paper over it, draw over it, show you how it can be better.
I worked with Frank. I worked with Frank Thomas, who is a legendary animator who did Captain Hook and Pinocchio and a lot of the Dwarfs and Snow White, and did the spaghetti sequence in Lady and the Tramp, which is a great bit.
Together. Frank did that.
When I started working with Frank, I was 20 years old and he was 62, and which seemed really, really old to me at that time. It was like, although it was a great opportunity. I loved working with Frank, but it's weird now, 62 doesn't seem nearly
Quite as old.
as old to me anymore. He was a kid. What was I thinking?
You were gonna, she was gonna ask a question.
Okay. Well, I wondered, since the wonderful animated films you directed, like Aladdin, didn't you direct Aladdin?
Yes, I
And
had the watch.
Princess and the Princess and the Frog. Just about your career, what you think makes a great animated movie, and then what is the future of 2D animation as you see it? Where will it go from here, and that development as well?
I think one of the things in animation that we always liked is we liked doing something that exploited the medium, that you could do something fantastic that animation was uniquely suited for. So like in Aladdin, where we had Robin Williams doing all those shape-shifting things as the genie. I mean, no live action film, I think, has quite been able to use Robin as well as we were able to just because of the medium. We always like to do something that almost could be done better in animation than it could be in live action. Now with all the special techniques they're using in live action, that's harder to say because live action's gotten almost more like animation. There's more and more special effects and all that sort of thing.
In terms of just films, I think, and of course we're big fans of Pixar films, and we know all the guys at Pixar, and since some have worked back and forth, and whether it's hand-drawn or digital or puppet animation or whatever, I think the thing they all sort of share in common is wanting to create really strong characters. I mean, that's certain characters that you really believe in that come to life, and they have to pull you into the story. I think. And story is just important. To try to really get good stories. I think it goes back somewhat. People know what the very first animated feature. There may be a couple of things before, but the first animated feature was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was done in '37. And people don't know when that was done, and people heard Walt Disney's doing an animated feature. Before that time, it was just shorts. It was just 7-minute shorts, and a lot of people thought Disney was crazy, and Snow White was called Disney's Folly, because a lot of people thought no one is going to be able to sit through a cartoon that's like 90 minutes long. The whole idea just seemed almost incomprehensible to some people. What they didn't realize was that Walt was really sensitive to that, and he wasn't doing just an extended cartoon. I mean, he really knew that to make it work, that you had to really get involved with the story, you had to get involved with the characters, that the whole world sort of had to become real to the audience, so that it almost was like a magic spell that was cast on the audience, because something in your brain, you know it's not real, you know it's all made up, but another part just sort of buys into the fantasy, so that when it works, when it's over, you actually feel almost like you've been transported somewhere, and you've had this kind of magical experience, which really was that kind of Disney experience, and that's still the case, I think. It's not easy to involve an audience in the sort of make-believe, everything is sort of just made up, but when it works, it is really sort of magical and special, I think.
Time for one last question.
Is there, out of The Little Mermaid, is there a scene or a character that was really tough to animate that sticks out in your mind? That just wouldn't work the way you wanted to, and it just...
That you had to go over. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I know, of course, we didn't animate on Mermaid, so
Right.
I know Ursula was
Yeah, I would say Ursula
tricky,
was a challenge.
with all the tentacles and the stuff.
The complexity of that, yeah. And I think realistic characters are always hard. So the Prince and Ariel were tricky. In some ways, Ariel was trickier when she was on land than she was underwater, because we know how people move almost, in the kind of normal world. But Glenn Keane and Mark Henn were in charge of animating Ariel, and they did a fabulous job. Ruben Aquino was in charge of Ursula, and I would say that was the challenge. I don't remember too many scenes that were kind of stumbling blocks.
No, Ursula did I would say just generally, princes were the toughest, still are kind of the toughest, although it's gotten easier now with more techniques, but the sort of realistic male character is probably the hardest character to pull off. That's why the princes tend to have smaller roles in a lot of the films, because it's just...
When I started at the studio, Eric Larson was the veteran animator that I worked with, and he had worked on Pinocchio, doing Figaro the Cat, things like that. He'd also worked on Cinderella, and I was complimenting him on his animation on Cinderella. He did a bunch of scenes of Cinderella. He was the actor that was, in fact, bringing her to life. in those scenes. And he also did the prince in Cinderella. And he said, you know, thanks for the stuff on Cinderella. He was so happy with that. But this is literally 27 years after the movie came out. He said, but yeah, my prince, it was stiff. It was just not. So he still felt like he hadn't quite gotten it right, you know. And so those were tough. So Eric in Mermaid was tough. Glenn Keane animated a bunch of it, him and others are animators as well. But I'd say in some ways he was slightly more challenging than Ariel, just for whatever reason. I don't know.
And he didn't have fun hair.
Yeah, his hair, yeah, right. Yeah.
That's interesting.
All right.
Thank you.
Got together for one quick group picture. You guys all take